Last week, I shared a video covering all of the new features and improvements added to Lightroom 9.4. This week, I'd like to share a similar video, except I'm going to go over the new features that were added to Adobe Camera Raw 18.4. Now, while I always start off by saying how excited I am for these types of videos because I love sharing the new features and improvements with all of you, this particular release has a new feature that is personally very important to me because it helps address a limitation that I've had for my entire life. But enough with the melodrama and suspense. How about I just show you all of the new features available to you in Adobe Camera Raw 18.4? Let's dive in. All right, so here we are in Camera Raw 18.4. And before we do anything else, I just want to take a really quick minute to pay respects to a good friend, a longtime friend of Adobe, Jeff Shiwi, photographer, just a really great guy, sadly passed away in late May. And I really love that the team put this tribute here in the About box for this version. And it's kind of funny because at least one of my memories of Jeff is we have this kind of recurring meeting of internal Lightroom people and certain external Lightroom users. And Jeff was at one, I don't know, a year ago. And I remember he had this feature request, and it's not the first time he brought it up, but he's like, I just want to be able to zoom in while cropping. And so, actually we released that feature first in Classic at Adobe Max last October, and then Lightroom for Desktop eventually got it a few months ago, as well as Camera Raw. And so it's just one of those things where I don't know, it's a fond memory I have. I remember when we actually released it, and yeah, just wanted to share that with you. And so with that, Jeff, may your memory be a blessing. All right, so Camera requires a host app, whether that's Bridge, which is what I'm using, or Photoshop. You need one of those apps to access Camera Raw, which means that you need to have either the photography plan or another plan that gives you access to Photoshop. So, with that, this first feature I mentioned in the intro is very important to me because I've made no secret about it. I'm red green colorblind. Always have been. It's not something I developed. Not something I'm going to get rid of. And for a while, that kind of affected me as a photographer, especially how I edit photos. It's part of the reason why I hardly ever take photos of people. And even when I do, even less frequently do I really edit those photos because I have a very hard time discerning skin tone as part of my red green color blindness. Fortunately, Camera Raw added a feature that makes it significantly easier for me, at least to visualize what's going on. So forever, we've had a histogram. It's right here, right? And so a histogram shows the tonal distribution of an image, basically how many pixels fall at each brightness level from, pure black on the left here to pure white on the right. Basically, it tells you the story about whether your image is underexposed, because if it is, then all of that data bunches to the left, or if it's overexposed, all the data bunches to the right, or if it's properly exposed, where things are distributed more evenly through the middle. So, yeah, if you need to know about the tone of your photo, the histogram basically has you covered. But what about the hue and saturation of your photo? Well, that's where the Vectorscope comes in. So to enable the Vectorscope in Camera Raw 18.4, just right click over here in the Instagram and you will see a menu item in the contextual menu over here called Show Vectorscope. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see here, there is the Vectorscope, and it is arranged in these different slices. And you can see if you hover over these little dots, you'll see the colors. There's red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow. And whatever colors appear in your photo will be plotted in this Vectorscope. So basically, the Vectorscope shows you the color of your photo. And specifically, what it's doing is it's plotting the hue and the saturation in a circular graph. So the reason why you're seeing these dots over here is because I created this document in Photoshop, and I specifically put each of the 6 colors from the Vectorscope. So there's red, magenta, blue, cyan, this is yellow, this is green. And even this, I have a hard time discerning. Honestly, I had to guess. I'm like, wait, is this green? Is this yellow? Um, and so how do I know though? How does this make it easier for me? Well, the first thing that I know is when I hover over each of these areas, you see the reticle in the Vectorscope. You see how it's snapping to the respective area. And so what this is showing me is like, again, over here, if I'm hovering over here, that reticle is on the yellow line. So it's telling me two things right now, that reticle right now. It's telling me that this color, or this hue rather, is yellow, and it's showing me the saturation. The further away the dot or the blob, which you'll see in a second, is from the center, the more saturation is in that color. As I decrease saturation, these dots will converge towards the center. So this right off the bat makes it much easier. And there's one other option here that I want to show you that's very important, specifically related to the issue that I mentioned a minute ago about editing portraits. If you right click on the Vectorscope, you'll see there's also another option called Show Skin Tone Indicator. And what this does is it places this line here that basically approximates overall the hue for a skin color. And so when you're editing portraits, which I'll show you in a second, this becomes my new best friend. This line is my new best friend when editing portraits. So let me show you really quickly. Let's go to saturation over here. You see the dots. I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to decrease saturation. And as I do you see how all the dots start to converge towards the center, which is telling me that, oh, there is absolutely no color now. All of the colors are at a zero saturation, or in this case, a negative 100. And then if I go the other way, you can start to see those dots start going beyond the threshold of the Vectorscope. And so again, this makes it easier for me to visualize the saturation within the photo, as well as specifically what hue I'm hovering my cursor on. But now let's look at some practical examples here of how the Vectorscope would have helped me out a lot if I had it. So first thing I want you to notice, do you see how it's not individual dots anymore? Because this photo has so many more colors, you can see these blobs here that show basically the distribution of hue and saturation. So you can see the way, the colors are plotting in the Vectorscope here. So we've got some colors here in between red and yellow. We've got some colors over here in magenta and blue. And so let me tell you a quick story about this photo. So this is Crater Lake in Oregon. And I remember I took this photo many years ago. And when I was editing it, I could see this kind of orangey yellow haze over here. And I thought either that was some sort of light pollution or maybe even some sort of remnant of the setting sun, probably light pollution. But still, when I was editing it though, I saw this area above it. And even to this day, I can't really tell. I can tell that there's a color to this. It's brighter, but it's different than the sky, and it's different than this area here, but I had no idea. It wasn't until I showed it to a buddy of mine who's like, "Oh, that's the aurora. You got the aurora in here." Now though, because I have the histogram, when I put my cursor over here, I can see, look on the Vectorscope, you can see the crosshairs. It's basically in between red and magenta, which the pretty much the only phenomenon that I can think of that would cause that would be an aurora. And so this would make it a lot easier for me to edit. One, it lets me know what I'm editing, but two, it also lets me see the saturation because I can't really tell the saturation of this. And so if I want to go ahead and adjust it, I can do that. I can adjust the hue, the saturation, and the luminance of any of these colors. So if I take the target adjustment tool and I bring it over here, you can see I can actually move it either towards magenta or towards red, however I want. Now, I still can't really see these colors, to be honest, but at least I can visualize them using data. And if I go back here, let me go back here for a quick second, because I think it's going to be easier to visualize what happens when you adjust hue. So let's look at green. Do you see how green over here is kind of slightly off? If I want to push green towards this specific line, I can do that. I can go to the color mixer with HSL, which is hue, saturation, luminance. I can select hue, and then I'll go to green and watch when I click. If I go one way, do you see how it's pushing it towards yellow? But if I go a different way, well, I can put it onto the green line if that's something that I want. I can do that with all of the different colors. And let me show you one more practical example. So this, again, I mentioned I don't like editing portraits. I know that this photo, I don't know if this person has rosacea or she just has maybe over accentuated makeup on her cheeks, but this is something I would have a very hard time editing. So you could see currently the vector scope is showing it's plotting the hue across the whole photo. But vector scope also works with masking. So let's say I want to just see the vector scope values for a specific region in the photo. I can do that. If I go to masking here, let's use the adaptive people mask, and I'm just going to stick with the facial skin. So it creates this mask here. I'm going to go ahead and click create. Now, do you see how the vector scope updates? It's only showing the color or the hue and saturation values for the mask. And you can see that as indicated by this icon here. This icon says vector scope is showing the selected mask only. So now you know what this corresponds to. So what does this mean for me? Well, we recently also added a new tool to point color. One of my favorite tools, I think this is one of the most important tools that we've seen in recent history. If I remember correctly, we introduced this at Adobe Max last year, and that is the variance slider, which is part of point color, which is thankfully in the masking edit stack. So the way that I'm going to use this is I'm going to select this dropper here, and with variance, what you want to do is you want to select kind of a mid-range hue. So you don't want to select the darkest part of the range. You don't want to select the brightest. In this case here, I'm just going to click right here. And so now what I can do is watch with variance, look at the blob over here. If I bring it to the right, which is what's going to happen is we're going to separate colors further away. You can see how those exactly what the vector scope is showing. Colors are diverging away from each other. They're also increasing in saturation, as you can see, the way it's getting further and further towards the edge of the vector scope. But I want the opposite. I'm actually going to go to the left here and look at what's happening. The colors are now starting to converge more on the skin tone line here. And you can see that represented here. With variance, I can adjust it so that right here, watch if I show you the before and the after, that's without the variance slider. That's with the variance slider. I can see that with actual data that those colors are starting to cluster more on the skin tone line. You don't have to be surgical about this. You don't have to make sure that everything is exactly on this line. In fact, we're making an update to Vectorscope eventually, hopefully soon, that will make that kind of even easier to understand. But point is, at least now, as someone who always shied away from editing portraits, this gives me peace of mind that my edit is actually pretty much correct. So there you go. That is how you can work with the vector scope with a range of different photos like landscapes and portraits and pretty much anything. It's just very helpful to see the hue and the saturation plotted over here on this graph. All right, let's move on to another photo. And this will allow me to illustrate a new feature, or it's not really a new feature. It's kind of an expansion of an existing feature. So if, let's say I wanted to adjust this area here along the horizon, I would go ahead historically, I would go to masking, I would go to linear gradient, and I want to adjust the top and the bottom. So I would, go right here. Let's show overlay so you can see what I'm talking about. And then I'd go to add, and I would add another linear gradient, and I would drag up. And so now what I would be able to do is, adjust maybe I wanted to darken that to accentuate, or I wanted to do the reverse. I wanted to accentuate the horizon, in which case I could do this and then invert it over here. And then, now we just have that. Well, now we made that a lot easier. Let's go ahead. I'm going to delete the masks here. And we did so because we now have, if you go to linear gradient, you'll see there's a new checkbox called bidirectional. So you can enable bidirectional either now before you apply the mask or after you apply the linear gradient. I'll start by applying it now. And now watch when I click, do you see how we now have this bidirectional linear gradient? Now, you might notice how it's a bit touchy. If you want a nice straight bidirectional gradient, just hold the shift key and that will lock you in this horizontal plane. And so what you can do is you can position this wherever you want. So I'll position this here. You can also do another thing where you can independently control the height or the feather, so to speak, of the top and the bottom. So here I can make this larger. I can make this shorter. Another thing you can do is very quickly, if you right click over here, you can flip orientation. So what that does is it flips. Basically what it does, it flipped the top, making it on the bottom and the bottom on the top. There's also a keyboard shortcut of apostrophe. And then also, if you wanted to do what I showed you originally, where you wanted to edit the top and the bottom, you can right click and very quickly invert. And so, again, just press the X key and you can invert it. So one of the things that I would do here, the benefits of this kind of bidirectional linear gradient is, let's say I want to go ahead and I want to increase the temperature here. Maybe I want to add a little bit of dehaze. But the problem is that you can see this is actually my buddy Matt Kloskowski. We went out to Bandon, Oregon, and we were photographing many years ago. Yeah, actually, you could see right there, 2013. So what I can do, I don't want the mask on him. I'll just go to subtract and select subject, and it cuts him out very nicely. And so now you can see if I turn the overlay off, this is the effect of that bidirectional mask, where it just makes it a lot easier to apply an edit to, say, a sweeping area along the horizon. Or again, let's go ahead. I'm going to create a new mask. Let's select linear gradient. This time I'm going to draw over here. Let's show the overlay. And then unlike before where I first clicked on bidirectional, I'm going to click it now. And you can see how it converts it to bidirectional. And then I'm just going to right click and go to invert. And now what I can do is I can kind of darken the top and bottom. So it just makes it a lot easier to make those kinds of edits to your photo. And so I think bidirectional is awesome. Now, I showed you subject, like select subject. That's kind of, it's a teaser because we recently released an improved select subject model. It is phenomenal. So let me show you here what that means. So I'll turn the overlay on and you can see, let's move this out of the way here. If I look at this mask, it's pretty good. This is the select subject mask that has been in Lightroom and Camera Raw for a while. But you can see it's kind of spilling over the wing, and you got this area here. Over here, there's just like stuff. And even here, it's just a bit of spillover. Well, I'm going to go ahead now and I'm just going to create a new mask. And I'm going to select subject so we can compare. And look at the difference. I mean, this is the original. This is the new one. I mean, it is so much tighter. You no longer have the spillover over here, the spillover over here, over here. It's just a nice, tight mask. Of course, you can use this in combination with the mask refinement tools that we added to Camera Raw not too long ago. So you can adjust the edge, you can adjust the feather of that mask as you see fit. Now, you might be asking, well, what happens if go here and you can see I have my select subject mask, which again, let's look at this. I mean, it selected this whole area within the top and bottom of the beak. You can see kind of like along the legs, not the cleanest mask. But you can also see that I am in a state here where I need to update certain AI tools in the AI edit status menu. In this case, I need to update adaptive profile and masking. And so the question you might ask is, well, what happens if I have a photo that has the select subject mask from any time before this version of Camera Raw or Lightroom 9.4 or Lightroom Classic 15.4? Well, if you update, and part of the update involves updating your masks, and you have select subject, it will automatically update to the new version of select subject. So watch, if I go ahead here and I click update all, you'll get this dialog. And it says updating may cause visible changes to existing edits. And that is true because what will happen is, as you'll see in a second, the new select subject mask will be applied to your photo. And so if you applied an edit and to this mask originally, and this area say got brighter, it will no longer be brighter. So watch, when I click OK, I mean, marvel with me at how good this mask is. It's so, I mean, it honestly, every time I do these demos, I'm just so impressed with how much better this model is. Notice how it no longer has the selection in between the top and bottom of the beak. The legs have a nice tight selection. The whole thing is perfect. And once again, you can go ahead and you can use the refinement tools here. Another thing that you can do, speaking of refinement, I'm gonna go ahead and create a new mask. I'll select objects here, and I'm going to go ahead. Let me use a marquee selection here, and I'm going to make another selection just like before. One of the improvements is that you can also now use the masking refinement with the object's mask. So that's just a quick little update as well. But in my opinion, the real kind of headliner here is the new select subject V5 mask that we have in Camera Raw as well as Lightroom. And so again, I love that we are just going gangbusters with these camera releases because each one just delivers some features that either I've been hoping for a while or that truly kind of help me personally, like I mentioned with the Vectorscope. What I would love to ask is I know you're going to say, when is this coming to Lightroom? It will come to Lightroom hopefully soon. But what would help is if you leave comments with which features you're most excited about. I take those and I share them with the product managers on the Lightroom team. It helps us stack rank. Like if 1,000 people are like, "Oh my god, I need Vectorscope yesterday," that's a very important signal. So use your voice. Share in the comments. Don't just say, "When is this coming to Lightroom?" Of course, we want it to come to Lightroom, and it will. But um, if there's a certain feature that I showed you that's really important, please let me know in the comments, and I promise you I will share that with the product managers. People inside Adobe watch these videos too. So, with that, again, I hope you found this as exciting as I do. And by all means, try it out. You know, you can take your photos from Lightroom, you can send them to Photoshop, you can export them and open them up in Bridge, and then send them into Camera Raw to play around with these features. Let us know what you think. If you didn't catch what was new in the previous version of Adobe Camera Raw, which was 18.3.1, I've got a video here for you, or you can see what YouTube thinks you might like. As always, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.